Next up, we've got Dr. Susan Grantham from Griffith University, who is going to be looking at exploring crisis communication during tropical cyclones. Please welcome Dr. Grantham.
Okay, I apologise for my voice. I'm progressively losing it, so I'm going to do my best. All right, so I'm here to talk to you today about a couple of different bodies of research that I've got on the go. The first one that you see on the screen there about the summer of 23-24 is published research, and the two tropical cyclones that occurred at that moment. I'm also working through some Alfred data for the summer of 25. I'm just going to state here that my main focus is normally on the role of media briefings and the live streaming of those media briefings during these sorts of severe weather events. That comes from my background in policing. So I worked in police media for a very long time. I worked in government for nearly 20 years before moving across to academia. So all the things you see on the screen there are still very important in this research, but because of the time, I want to focus on the TikTok aspect. So I'm also a TikTok researcher, and I predominantly focus on the role of TikTok in politics and campaigning. But because of my love of crisis events and then my love of TikTok as in scholarship, I decided to look at both. So I decided to go ahead with those 3 severe weather events, looking at the first 2 as one study. What you can see on the screen is the dates relate to the media briefings that occurred and were also live streamed. Then I've got the number of TikTok videos that I scraped and when I scraped it. So for the first 2 tropical cyclones, this was at the time of the cyclones making landfall. So the reason for that is I wanted to see what people were accessing at the moment of landfall. It was also related to the way the system algorithmically delivered that content, so trending data. For Alfred, though, I wanted to take a slightly different approach because we did see the live streams actually be live streamed on TikTok. So I did a much more rigid collection of the TikTok data, and I collected it at each time or immediately after the media briefings to see what was trending at that moment in time. So that resulted in 300 TikTok videos. The idea model is the main model that I use to analyse the media briefings, but I'll keep moving through so that we can see the data. In Jasper, it was quite an interesting thing. TikTok was being used as almost a misinformation tool, a place for people to go and just post what they wanted to post about their experiences or a bit of satire, mostly to get views. So what we saw, though, was a lot of humour. Of that humour, there was a lot happening outside in the elements, so outside in the storm, which is exactly what government messaging tells you not to do. There was also a very high number of those videos being outside, with 4 of those being news organisations. So this is the stock standard reporter with a microphone and the wind's gushing and the rain getting them and they're wearing their raincoat. So it's exactly what you would expect to see. What is concerning, though, is that one business that used humour. So this was a boating company, and they were doing really silly things on the boat in very wild water. There was no official government accounts, though, appearing in that data, which I thought was quite problematic. This is just a sample of the ones that I collected. So the first one is satire. Or is it going to play?
I'm a simple girl. Always loved the countryside. It's all I've ever known, really. The chirp of the birds in the wind under my skirt. Mama always called me a wild one. Wasn't meant for a small town like this.
So I'm cutting them short because they go forever. But you can see it's obviously satire. However, a lot of people use TikTok without the sound on. So the problem that I have with this video is that it talks about what you do when the water is cut off. So if you're not actually listening to the audio and recognising this as satire, you might actually go out and collect floodwater. The next one.
Cyclone Jasper has hit up here in North Queensland and he's brought a shit ton of rain. We live in Finch Hatton Gorge and the only way in or out is through these creek crossings. We usually get dozens of tourists each day.
So again, very problematic. Obviously a local clearly knows what he's doing, but in the world of TikTok, there are a lot of people travelling through Queensland. You see something like this and you think it's okay to go in floodwaters. So again, very much going against what the government messaging is. But then when I looked at the Kirrily data, things started to change. And there's a couple of different reasons why this could occur. Most likely because it was Townsville, which is obviously a place where people experience cyclones more regularly. But the local accounts, particularly this one local account that appeared 7 times, and as you can see, her videos were educational. She also had an existing following. So she was what we would call a mumfluencer. So she's a mum of twins, and that is her online identity. But she used her outreach to actually educate people on how to engage during a cyclone. And I will show you one of hers. What's very interesting is that no humour occurred in that trending data, and only 5 were outside in the elements. So again, it was the news organisations doing what the news organisations do. Premier's account also started to appear, which is also quite interesting, but we have to acknowledge that Stephen Miles he'd only recently taken over, and his TikTok had only recently been reactivated. But this is Eliza, the mumfluencer.
Come with me as I get my house ready for Tropical Cyclone Kirrily, a cyclone that's expected to cross tonight at a Category 2. First thing is to bring in all the outdoor furniture. All of our outdoor furniture is very lightweight and we don't have enough room in the garage for it. So we flipped our dining room table.
So again, I'm cutting it short because it goes for about 7 minutes. It's a fantastic video. She takes people through exactly what she's doing to secure her home and to keep her family safe. I found this very interesting, and this started raising some questions for me. Why aren't we using content creators in this way, particularly if they're out there already doing this? So obviously this is a single isolated incident. It's a small data set. One influencer kind of stood out in this data set. So when Tropical Cyclone Alfred came along, I thought I would collect a few more. And what we found, of course, is this very, very high number of influencers. I have to acknowledge that influencers in Southeast Queensland are very different to influencers in Townsville. So we did get a lot of data from people that were just trying to get following, or, you know, they're not the ones we would go to in government because they would expect to be paid. So a couple of problems in that space. Some other interesting things that popped out was the use of humour. So again, we did still see humour take part, which of course we have to remember that TikTok is an algorithmically driven site. So engagement is required to actually beat that algorithm and get seen by people. So it's not unusual for humour to be used, but when humour is used well, it can be very powerful. Everything else was pretty much as I expected. A couple of accounts were deleted, so they were there trending and then deleted, which suggests they might have been bots. There's also a lot of local, news sites, but also this TikTok native news, so the ones that actually live within TikTok as opposed to what we know as news. And then my favourite is the one dog. Fantastic, let's use dogs to deliver our messaging. The outside in the elements, though, is another thing that I'm really struggling with right now with my co-author on this paper, because a lot of that outside in the elements was the surf, you know, people out there surfing, which of course, if you're a surfer, a cyclonic wave is, you know, the pinnacle. So we're trying to kind of navigate that as to whether it is actually problematic or not. But here's some examples of the types of videos that appeared. The first one is someone with a huge following. And again, I'm only showing you a very, very small sample because she's actually quite irritating in the way that she speaks. You will see.
This is my Escape Cyclone Alfred vlog. This is what it looked like outside my apartment like 3 days ago, and I was like, I cannot have this. So me and a few of my neighbours from our building, I was like, do you guys want to go to Sydney? Like, we just drive to Sydney. It was 8.5 hours to drive.
You get it. That was enough. But again, she's huge following. You know, this video was seen so many times. I don't think you can quite see the number of views or the number of likes, but it was very significant. Again, slightly problematic behaviour. We're telling people to stay inside, and yet she's decided to go with friends to Sydney. So again, we're starting to see this use of the platform to encourage people to do things that the government is telling you not to do. The second one is very interesting because, again, huge following, but internationals.
24 hours, our house is about to get hit by a cyclone.
Yeah, we have never in our lives experienced this before. I guess we've not really got any idea what to expect, but we need to prepare for the worst just in case.
So I've just done a quick check. 814,000 likes. So this one's in the millions of views. So another great example, people with a really big following, it's obviously going to hit trending data because they're already trending accounts, and they're doing the right thing. They're telling us how to navigate this space that we're not used to, and helping deliver government messaging. So that brings me to actually the last slide, which is where to from here. So as I said, I have published the first paper, and I did get a little bit of media engagement on that. It is available for you to read, and it is open access. Whoever had that issue earlier, I only publish open access for that exact reason. We've got to make it accessible. But I want to also just point out here that I'm working alongside an agency called Sentiment Agency, who are a New South Wales-based agency. They have been involved in the development of influencer campaigns in the political landscape, and they're run by Holly Rankin, who you might also know as Jack River, a musician. So I'm working with them because they have a very big passion in engaging content creators to deliver particularly democratic information and ensuring that democracy occurs well online. So we would like to be able to pilot this idea, particularly now that we're in our next disaster season. So partner with Queensland Government and provide that actual official messaging to those ethical content creators. What I mean by ethical content creators is not the ones that expect to be paid, but the ones that are actually using their platform for good. So it's about speaking to that hard-to-reach audience. There is always a very big chunk of people who will not know where to go for information, particularly the younger generations who do not engage with traditional news. They do not know to go to the ABC radio. Instead, they are using TikTok as a search engine. So we as government, as disaster people, need to be engaging with them in the place that they want to be engaged with. And that's something that we see in politics anyway. Politicians use these sites to tackle that engagement group. It's ultimately about public safety, enhancing public safety and saving lives. So if we can get to the right people in the right way, then ultimately we will be able to resolve these sorts of issues of people doing silly things during cyclonic events. And that is everything. So there's plenty of time for questions.
You've got. There are a couple of questions there. I think you've probably answered the first one around whether government agencies should consider using influencers. One was, what are social media platforms doing to manage misinformation during disaster events? For example, are community guidelines being monitored for misinformation?
Yeah, look, during disaster events, most of the platforms are actually pretty good in developing ways that we can tell them when misinformation is occurring. We also find during disaster events that it immediately becomes a trending topic, and that's not just because of the output, that's because of the platform itself putting that within the algorithm to boost that content. So unfortunately, in the world of misinformation and social media, it's a very difficult one to navigate, but I always stand by, and particularly from my government experience in managing social media, I always stand by the only way you're ever going to tackle it properly is by being there. So we obviously saw the step forward with the Christopher Lee government using TikTok Live during Alfred, but if we're not actually embedding ourselves into the trending content, then you're going to constantly have that issue of misinformation.
One more from here. Hi, great presentation. One of the challenges we have from a government perspective is we're not able to use TikTok. So if we're not able to access that form of media, how do we reach that cohort of people?
There are a lot of government organisations back using TikTok, so that would be something that needs to be discussed, because the ruling that occurred in, whenever that was, 23, was that you shouldn't be using it on a government device, but you can use it on an external device. So, for instance, when I was in police, we always had our police computers, but we also had our standalone computer. That's where we did all of our social media. So we didn't do it on the main computer. And same with phones, for instance. You'd have like a work burner phone that wasn't connected to the system that you could actually use to deliver that messaging. And as I said, a lot of the organisations are back up using it. So police are one, absolutely back up using it, and all of the politicians are still using it. But another way to get around that, of course, is that content creator stuff. Actually work out who is engaging in the content or engaging in the topic, tapping them on the shoulder and seeing if they will help deliver message.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.